Good evening, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Anybody hear me?
Yes, John.
Good evening. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Yes, good evening, John. Yeah. Good, thank you. Welcome this evening to the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'd like to remind everybody that this meeting is being streamed live on our website and therefore being recorded. Remote meetings are something new to us. The unfamiliarity and the need to get used to their technical operation mean that they are unlikely to go as smoothly as meetings that are held in person. So I hope everybody taking part or observing will actually bear with us. To help us, councillors have been given guidance on the conduct of remote meetings. I'd just like to emphasise a few of these points. Firstly, hopefully members of the committee are taking part from a place where they will not be disturbed or distracted. When they are not actively participating in the meeting, I would respectfully ask members and officers to keep their audio and video turned off, please. Anybody wishing to speak should type an H in the chat box and I will call them when it is their turn to speak. All questions and contributions must come through the chair, and please remember to turn on your video and audio when I call you to speak. Any councillor with an interest in any item should declare it and keep their audio and video off when it is being considered. They will not be included in any vote on that particular subject. When it comes to a decision on any of the recommendations or motions before us, I will assume that if no one says that they oppose them, everybody will be in agreement. If, however, anyone says that they are opposed, I will need to ask for a formal vote to be conducted. Lastly, if we lose the live stream on the website for whatever reason, I will have to adjourn the meeting for approximately 10 minutes, and hopefully that problem can be fixed. If it can't, I will have to adjourn the meeting until a future date. That is the main admin out of the way. So again, good evening, everybody. Are there any apologies for absence and any substitutions thereof, please?
Thank you, Chair. I haven't had any apologies for absence, but I'll just run through who's with us tonight. We've got yourself as Chair, Councillor Simon Goldman, Councillor Ashley, Dudley, Fuller, Grundy, Highland, Lager, Large, Sismy, Still, Watson, Whitehead and Young. And we've got a few councillors joining us who aren't members of the committee. They're Councillors Robinson, Marie Goldman, McCrory, Pooley, Paul Clark and Chris Davidson. And the officers tonight are Louise Goodwin and Keith Nicholson and myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, second item, which is minutes. I have agreement that the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of February are a true representation of what actually took place.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, put it the other way, nobody's opposed to them in any way. No, I'll take that as a yes then. Okay, thank you very much. Item number 3, declaration of interest. All my members are reminded that they must disclose any interests they know they have in any items of business on the meeting's agenda, and that they must do so at this point on the agenda or as soon as they become aware of the interest. If the interest is a disclosable pecuniary interest, they are also obliged to notify the monitoring officer within 28 days of the meeting. Item number 4. Sorry, has anybody got any interest? No? Good. Item number 4, public question time. Any member of the public may ask a question or make a statement at this point in the meeting. Each person has 2 minutes and a maximum of 15 minutes is allotted to public questions and statements, which must be about matters for which this committee is responsible. The chair may disallow a question if it is offensive, substantially the same as any other question, or requires disclosure or exempt of confidential information. If the question cannot be answered at the meeting, a written response will be provided after the meeting. Any member of the public who wishes to submit a question or statement to this meeting should email it 24 hours before the start. All valid questions and statements will be published within the agenda on at least 6 hours before the meeting. I assume at this point there's obviously no written questions, and I assume there's no questions from the public at all.
No, we don't have any tonight.
That's okay, fine, thank you. Okay, item number 5, decisions called in. To report on any cabinet decisions called in and how to decide how they should be progressed. Well, there haven't been any. So that item is dealt with. Okay, we start the interesting parts of the evening now. And item number 6 is the cabinet portfolio updates. I'm very pleased to say that we've got the leader of the council, Councillor Stuart Robinson, to give an update, and he's very kindly provided a report this morning, so everybody's had a chance to actually read it. Can I hand over to you now, Councillor Robinson?
Good evening. Yeah, hello everyone. Yes, so I hope you've had a chance to read that. What I've tried to do is, in the early part of the report, sort of show what we might call will be a normal timetable or normal sort of calendar of events, and then later on to describe some of the things which have happened more related in the last 3 months related to responding to the current crisis that we're all in, and some of the things that the council has done to cope with that. Obviously, there's a lot there, and there's a lot still to do, but we're going to have to adjust to new ways of working, not just the online meetings, but the way we run the council and its budgets. So there are challenging times ahead, but we're trying to keep going with the vast majority of things that we do as we normally do. So I've put a lot in the report, so I'm probably best if I just take questions now. Happy to amplify any of the sections that are in the report. So I'll hand over to members.
Are there any questions from anybody? Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question to Councillor Robinson regarding the Thursday morning briefings that we've had from Mr. Evely and yourself. They've proved very popular with members, and I was wondering whether there are any plans to how long they would continue for, whether they may become permanent.
I think that's a very good point. I will certainly discuss it with him. I think so much was changing on a daily basis that having a weekly meeting was relevant. Whether I think at the moment we're on 2 weeks. If we find after the next one that there wasn't much to report, then maybe we won't. Hopefully, the normal cycle of meetings will enable members to ask questions on anything they need to. So I suspect we'll keep it going for some time to come. And then if it seems that there isn't much to report, then I imagine the necessity may just fade away. But certainly we're not going to stop them for now.
Thank you for that. Are you happy with that, Councillor Young?
Yes, thank you.
Good, thank you. Okay, Councillor Goldman, Simon.
Thanks, Chair. Actually, Councillor Young beat me to it. I was going to say exactly the same thing. But I just want to reiterate, I think it's been working really well, considering everything's been done virtually. How the leader and deputy leader have been speaking to the various directors, and the chief exec has been brilliant. I mean, the council's run extremely smoothly, probably better than it has done in the past, but may it long continue. And hopefully we can just one day we'll catch up and actually have these meetings in person.
Okay, thank you. Oh, good evening to Councillor Hyland. You've joined the happy band of asking questions. Carry on.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening. Can I first of all welcome the reports that have been provided? Would you consider providing outcomes achieved from all those meetings you've attended? There's a great list of meetings there, but perhaps you could flesh out a little bit what do you think those meetings actually outcomes achieved? And you mentioned about looking at the budget. As 85% of our commercial assets are in the commercial property, a large chunk of that's in High Chelmsford. Have you got any insight to how many rent holidays to tenants in our commercial properties that we own have been given?
I'll deal with the second one first because that's a sort of a shorter one. And the short answer is no, I don't have the numbers to hand. At the moment, I think it's still too early to tell what sort of impact we're going to have on the shopping centres, and we're going to have to wait until the shops don't all reopen, some up today and the rest next week, although some shops have not yet made a commitment in the centre to opening next week. The business improvement district are putting in various initiatives to help with social distancing in the city centre. I think at the moment we'll just have to see how it goes. It's obviously a concern. We have sold off some of our retail property recently because we wanted to reduce our exposure to that particular risk. But you're right to raise it as a question, and we do need to keep it under review. As regards the more general question about outcomes of these meetings, that's a very fair question, and I think we all ask ourselves that frequently. I would start with, as far as the cabinet is concerned. Well, do we get anything out of that? Well, we get papers through, and I guess you're referring to some of the sort of the more external meetings. And I think I mentioned specifically on the leaders group and the economic subgroup. Councillor Marie Goldman and I are both very determined to ensure we do get some positives out of that rather than just it be a talking shop. And the same with the One Chelmsford board. There is a tendency for people from all the different organisations to come to the meeting, tell everyone what they're doing, and everyone nods sagely and goes away again. And I really would like to see those meetings and any similar meetings being how can we solve our joint problems together. It's something that Mr. Evely and I have tried to do at the Tech Ambassadors meeting, for example, where we have indeed said, okay, here's an issue. How can the partners around the table solve it? And some of the sort of the high tech initiatives have led to closer relationships between Anglia Ruskin University and some of our high tech companies. So I think that's an example of where we have made a bit of progress, but it's certainly work in progress. On the meetings with the County Council, although I can't see him, I'm sure Councillor Whitehead will be nodding when I talk about the frustrations of dealing with the County Council. And those meetings, I think, are an opportunity to resolve sort of differences of opinion between the two councils, and we can sometimes make progress. The meetings that are related to the Local Government Association, the best that comes out of those is sharing of best practice when other councils can talk about how they do something differently and better than we're doing, and perhaps we can learn from them. So I always try to come away from a meeting thinking what was the useful thing I got out of that meeting, and note it down, and then if I didn't, think about how we might make them more productive in future. But it's definitely it's a question that we should all have uppermost in our minds when we have our meetings.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you for that. I don't appear to have any more questions from anybody. If that's the case, And I'd just like to thank Councillor Robinson for A, putting the report together, and B, very kindly answering the questions. Long may it continue, and we have the updates as and when we can.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you ever so much.
Sure.
Thank you. If I can move on now to the Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Connected Chelmsford, Councillor Mari Goldman. Over to you, my dear. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to be sharing my screen just for a second, so let me set that up if you don't mind. I'm hoping very much that you're going to be able to see this. Hopefully you can see in front of you a holding screen which with the title and the title screen. Right, apologies for not providing a copy of this in advance. I'm more than willing to, of course, to provide a copy of this after the meeting, which can be circulated. And of course, if anybody has any questions after this presentation, then please feel free to ask me. But if you don't feel that you've had time to kind of digest the information that I'm about to present, then of course, I'm always happy to take questions from members after the fact as well. So feel free to send me an email. I will try to go through this as quickly as I can. I have a number of slides. I would first of all like to say that I do think it is important to give an update of all the amazing stuff that's been going on in the Connected Chelmsford Directorate, which is all within my portfolio. There has been a huge amount of stuff going on, and sometimes some of this work is going on very much behind the scenes, so not seen by the public. And often not seen by members either, but it's essential to the functioning of the council, and that's why I'd like to include it here. I will try not to read every word of the slide. You can read of the slides, you can read them for you, and I may skip over a few points, but as I said, I'll provide a copy of this afterwards so you can read it in more detail. I'd like to start off though with just giving a little bit of an overview about the roles and activities of the deputy leader, the role of deputy leader within the council, and then move on to my role as a cabinet member. I do this for the benefit of any members of the public who might be watching and may not be familiar with how the council operates. So if you'll indulge me a little bit, as deputy leader, my overriding goal is to promote Chelmsford. That's everything about Chelmsford. Its goals, its objectives, not obviously just within the council, but also to other organisations, both inside and outside of the district of Chelmsford. And I do this by in lots of different ways. I am a member of various different groups and that meet regularly. Councillor Robinson mentioned earlier the Tech Ambassadors Group. I sit on that. I also sit on the Chelmsford Business Board, which is a group of local businesses, as the name kind of gives away slightly, and listening to what businesses need in Chelmsford. I'm a relative newcomer to that group, and I look forward to seeing how it can help us gather the opinions of local businesses and how that feeds into policy. And I'm very proud to be a member of Success Essex, which is a federated board of the South East Local Enterprise Partnership, or otherwise known as CELEP. And the local enterprise partnerships, also known as LEPs, there are several of them around the country, and they are a conduit for funding from government and a way to promote the different regions. So we're part of the South East region. We're bundled together with Kent and Sussex, East Sussex, I think, and obviously Essex, and the Success Essex Board is the local part of that, and I'm very pleased to be on that and promoting Chelmsford within that. And then, of course, if there are questions from the media and from the public, I'm happy to do media interviews and have done in the past as appropriate. And then, as my role as deputy leader, I provide strategic direction for the council, which I do through cabinet meetings, in my role as a member of the Chelmsford Policy Board, and of course within our political leadership team, which is often referred to as PLT. And then finally in weekly meetings with the leader and chief executive of the council. So my role as cabinet member for Connected Chelmsford is a bit different. Obviously, there's some overlap, and the two obviously I'm the same person, so obviously I do the things in tandem. but I provide political and strategic leadership for the Connected Chelmsford Directorate in particular. So that includes fortnightly meetings with the Director of Connected Chelmsford, that's Louise Goodwin, who's here this evening. I have weekly communications briefings. Important to note that they're weekly at the moment, but during the early days of dealing with the coronavirus pandemic, these were daily. So I was making sure that we were on top of the council communications. And I attend various other meetings with other teams within my directorate as required. And then I communicate those key issues back to the Cabinet and to PLT where they are discussed. And one of my other roles is that I review and approve press releases as required as well. So that's a quick overview of what I do. But I'd like to move on now to the service updates. So this is going through as briefly as I can the different services within the Connected Chelmsford Directorate, and just give you an overview of what's been happening really essentially over the last year. And there have been a lot of things going on. So we'll move on swiftly to the first one, which is digital services. So we've been doing a lot of device rollouts. That means giving new hardware, new equipment to members of staff. So making sure that we've got all the right devices to be able to do our jobs, or for them to be able to do their jobs efficiently and effectively. That includes bigger monitors. We've moved around 200 users from desktops to laptops, which in this coronavirus pandemic has proved incredibly useful because it has meant that a lot of people can work from home. We've done things like we've enabled Skype or Teams in all of the meeting rooms except the council chamber, which is a bit difficult to do it in. There's some technical issues there. But the aim of that is to be able to hold these meetings when we go back to a kind of socially distanced but more physical world, being able to hold those meetings and broadcast them. It was always a goal of mine as soon as I got elected to make sure that these meetings were broadcast, and we've achieved it partly by accident, I guess. We're forced into it, but we were already on the route to making it possible to broadcast meetings. So that's something that we've been working on, and it's been largely successful so far. I hope any members of the public watching will feel that it's been reasonably successful, but not perfect, but we're getting there. Other things digital services have been working on, we've been rolling out Windows 10 and Office 365. Which have brought about a huge amount of improvements. We've completed the move to Skype for Business, including the contact centre, and as members will be aware of, a lot of us have moved from the kind of slightly older technology of Skype for Business, moving on to Microsoft Teams, and that is gradually rolling out across the council, and we expect that to be complete November to December this year. And as I said, meetings are now broadcast online as standard. We've been rolling out multi-function devices. So that's kind of things like printers with integrated scanners and all that kind of stuff, which is not only more efficient, it's also a bit cheaper, which is good. We've been updating the customer relationship management system, otherwise known as Microsoft Dynamics. We have one of the great things about this is that as the digital transformation program moved into a kind of business as usual with regular updates, the business confidence that has increased, which is fantastic, and that means it's enabled us to do a lot more. That's fantastic to see. I think it's really important to give credit where credit is due, and I would like to say that I think it was probably a bold move by the previous administration to go through the digital transformation program. I think we have absolutely reaped the rewards of that and continuing to roll that out. Certainly in the current situation, we were ahead of the game. We were ahead of a lot of other local authorities around the country in being able to work from home, and so many of our staff being able to work from home, not having to cut services. I think that's absolutely fantastic, and I know that a lot of the public are really appreciative of that as well, which we'll come to a bit more in detail later. And then very quickly, we've created something called the Digital Programme Office, which is for spearheading certain projects within the council to make us more efficient. Skipping on, And then just finally, we talk a lot about remote access and obviously working from home. That's one form of remote access, but not all systems are geared up to be able for people to be able to work from home. And these so-called legacy systems, we are gradually kind of moving away from those, and a remote access solution has been built and deployed to help staff who are using those legacy systems move for their roles to move so that they can work from any device. Okay, moving on to human resources. This is one of the unsung heroes. People almost kind of take it for granted that the council's 900 and something staff, you know, things just happened. Well, they all get paid. They got paid on time, and we have to have a focus as well on making sure that they are healthy and focusing on employee well-being. And that's been happening a lot, and it's particularly important at this current time. So we have stepped up communication and the information channels in the current pandemic, and with a particular emphasis, obviously, on supporting remote workers. It's really easy to get disconnected in a time like this and just feel that you're not part of a team, and that's really not good for anybody. And so we've been making sure that remote workers are properly being supported at this time. And that's included getting information out to managers as well on how to manage their staff. What are the new things that they need to think of? You know, can they create regular meetings? You know, tea breaks and that general chat. The Americans call it the water cooler conversations. You know, can we make sure that those happen? So rolling out information to managers and then providing FAQs for staff in response to COVID-19 and any government announcements that you might see and say, hang on a minute, how does that affect me? And the and human resources have been very good at making sure that staff feel informed. Got some other things going on as well, some menopause awareness sessions, and then we've been creating there's some other policies that have been developed. I've just skipped through these, you can see them, I'm sure you don't need me to read them on the slide. And then something to be very, very proud about is that for the 11th year in a row, we have retained the Investors in People Gold accreditation, which I think is absolutely fantastic and testament to the fantastic work that the Human Resources Department does and that the Council in general is doing. And assessors particularly praised our openness and trust, and as far as I'm concerned, long may that continue. A few other things, been raising awareness of inclusion, equality and diversity within the council, and in these kind of turbulent and uncertain times, I think that's particularly important. We have you might have seen before lockdown, if you remember that far back, it does seem quite a while ago now, that there were kind of our corporate values were up in posters around the council buildings, and that's about fostering a team spirit and making sure that we all have the same values and we move forward together as a council, and embedding our values and behaviours, and then a few other kind of things. So moving on to the Customer Services Centre, this is probably one of the most public-facing parts of the things that we do within the council as a statutory kind of thing, making sure that we have a way for the public to contact us, but obviously in current times that can't be face-to-face. So we have already or had already been trying to move and focus the shift onto encouraging more people to do things online. It's more efficient, apart from anything else. You don't, and it's quicker. And failing that, we want to get people to call in rather than to come into the customer service centre or make an appointment if they absolutely have to. And that has decreased in-person visits by 40% compared to the previous year. I should add that is BC, that's before coronavirus. So I think that shows good progress. But I think calls coming in are still remaining quite high. So we need to focus on that for the next 12 months, because a lot of stuff can be done online, and we certainly want to move towards that. So obviously lots of people are working from home. In the customer service centre, prior to the pandemic, we had around 6 advisors, and now all of them are able to work from home. I should say 6 advisors that were working from home, and now all of them can. And the level of service hasn't been affected, which I think is absolutely brilliant. But customers have been really appreciative that we've been there at the end of the phone. When they've called, we've answered them and we've spoken to them. And we've introduced lots of kind of new things over that time as well, which is really good. And we've managed to keep our Civic Centre reception desk open throughout the entire lockdown. It was initially staffed by external security personnel, and this week we're moving back to it being staffed by our own staff, making sure, of course, that we have full signage and social distancing. And then finally, we've introduced some training videos and a new visitors calendar. So moving on away from human resources, moving to events and engagement, getting more and more public facing now. So the last, I guess, obviously last year from kind of summer onwards was great. And there were some great things that went on. 3 Foot People Festival in 2019 sold out for the first time in quite a few years, which is fantastic. There were 13,500 attendees, and the income was up on the previous year as well, which is really good to see. And in fact, it was so good to see that we had a long discussion about it and thought, well, actually, this is obviously something that the people of Chelmsford really appreciate. And actually, people come from further afield than just Chelmsford to come to the 3 Foot People Festival. So we did take the decision to extend the festival so that it would take place over 4 days in 2020. Again, BC. Plans obviously had to change. But we had our city photo competition, which had loads and loads of entries, much more up on the previous year, lots of sponsorship, and we had an exhibition of the winners in the city centre. Fling Festival, we decided to have a fallow year in 2020, so that's one of the things that was not planned to take place this year, because we wanted to have a bit of consultation about its future and decide, where should it be, what do people want out of Fling Festival. And that's going on at the moment. I should just say that we've had 450 responses on that consultation so far, which I think is a fantastic number. The target was just 300, so I think we're doing okay there, and it's great to see that level of engagement from something that obviously the public do feel quite strongly about. And then there was SW Fest, which is a local festival. For those who don't know it's aimed at residents of Southwood and Ferrers. It's a free festival. It started in 2017 with approximately 2,000 attendees, but 2019 was its biggest event yet, and it saw more than 2,600 attendees, which is really good. Unfortunately, we have had to move on in a coronavirus world, and the sad news is, as I'm sure you're all aware, was that the 3 Foot People Festival had to be cancelled. But a slight kind of thing to be pleased about, I suppose, is we've looked at new ways of working, and we worked with our long-time sponsor, the Good Play Guide, and just a few weeks ago delivered the Play at Home Fest. And we hosted the 3 Foot Preschooler stage on our social media channel. So that was an online festival, again, aimed at children. It was really good, actually. We received about 25,500 views on the Chelmsford City Events YouTube channel over the late May bank holiday, and increased our followers on Facebook as well, which all helps to get our message out, which is fantastic. We have kept the city photo competition running. But we've reduced the number of categories in it to make sure that people are staying safe while they're taking their photos. A launch event that was planned to be in the Meadows Shopping Centre has been replaced by online advice and guidance. And unfortunately, I think for reasons that we can all understand, the Older People's Information Day has been cancelled, and so has SW Fest for 2020. Of course, we hope to bring those things back when we can. So on to communications now. There's been a huge amount of stuff going on in comms. This is going back to that idea of unsung heroes. We see the communications that come out from the council. We see them come out on various channels, whether that's through our email or out on social media. The comms team who put out those messages are absolutely brilliant. They work so hard, all hours of the night and day, far beyond the call of duty, a lot of the time responding as quickly as possible as they can to the public, to inquiries from journalists and the media in general, and helping us to get our message out about the fantastic work that we're doing at the council. So I just want to say a big thanks publicly to the comms team, because I know how hard they've been working, and I'd like everybody else to know that as well. I hope they'll forgive me. I'm not going to go through all of the little bits of detail that are on this slide, that they dealt with a huge amount of stuff. I think maybe just this first one in particular, 4 elections in a year was a huge amount for them to deal with. And when we come on to Legal and Democratic, the same goes for them as well. It generated a huge amount of media inquiries, and they dealt with it fantastically. Lots of new stuff that we've been doing. So that was kind of in general. In summer 2019, of course, you'll all remember there was the opening of the Riverside Leisure Centre. I mean, it feels a million years ago, I think, but it was there, and it was something that happened within the last year. Again, we got regional and national coverage for that, and that's in no small part down to the work of the comms team to make sure that our messages that we're getting out there. The museum reopened, and again, a big effort there to make sure that was publicised properly. We now use a lot of videos in social media and news releases, and that's quite a big shift in the last year. In particular, I bang on about the use of videos, and we'll come back to that point in a few slides. But it's a key. It's something that we have to do. We have to, people like sitting and watching the TV, and video is such a powerful medium that we have to keep on using it, and it is really powerful. And we've got a lot of engagement from people by using video. So long may that continue. Right, communication continued. A few more things. Obviously, a lot of stuff that was going on. Declaration of a climate emergency. In December 2019, we achieved coverage in multiple national publications. It wasn't necessarily a positive story, but it was positive from the council's point of view. So we need to make sure that we continue pushing out nationally to get Chelmsford on the maps. And then in autumn 2019, we scripted, filmed, edited and promoted 2 videos about homelessness in Chelmsford, and just to get an idea of engagement, which had over 1,000 views and positive comments. So I think we are, using it to our full advantage, which is great. Various other things that we've been doing, in particular related to the coronavirus. This will be quite recent in your memories. These online meetings, the first one of which was actually a very informal one with the cabinet, and it was a cabinet Q&A on social media. It attracted 6,000 views with some very positive comments on it. So I think the public, given the chance to engage in this manner, like doing that. So I think that's a reason to continue taking it forward. So moving on, we started using Instagram, which is fantastic. And we've been launching various campaigns on Facebook promoting, and Twitter and Instagram promoting what our staff have been doing during this coronavirus lockdown. We're doing things a bit differently. So for VE Day, when we would have preferred to have been out, in the streets and all that kind of stuff, with some, live music and what have you. Hopefully you saw the video that was put together, and I have to say I think it was done absolutely brilliantly, and thank you again so much to the team for putting that together. I think it really kind of lifted the spirits at that time. And we have produced our first in-house animation, and I wanted to share that with you. So this is something which we wanted to do to try and find a way to explain to people how finances in local government work. It's a really dry subject, but it's a really important subject, because we know, and members I'm sure know, that it is not going to be easy dealing with the finances going forwards. Because of the loss of income, and we wanted to provide a way of trying to explain that to not just to the public, but actually it turns out there's quite a few MPs and even civil servants who don't understand how local government finances work, and I can understand why the public might not. We need to educate them and explain to them how it all works. So we produced as an attempt to try and explain that. We produced our first in-house animation. The team had never done anything like this before, and I'd like to share it with you now. I hope I've remembered to share my volume from my computer. If I haven't, it would just be background music, so don't worry about it too much, but I will play it now. There we go, our first foray into animation. So I hope you'll appreciate the work that went into that. It's very, very difficult to get a complicated message into a simple message like a video like that. So I hope you'll join me in saying well done to the team. So just moving on, just very quickly, we've done lots of marketing, Riverside launch, which we talked about before. We've launched various other things as well, helping with the launch of the museum, an updated and revised website. And we've been focusing a lot more on social media. In the theatres, Someone Who Watched Over Me was a fantastic play which benefited from a significant marketing effort, and it really did. It was, it was extremely successful, and also led to a growth in our database, which means kind of more customers that we can connect with next time around. When it comes to marketing, the marketing team, what they did for in the coronavirus activities, we moved online, and then talking about the museum, we thought, well, the museum's shut, but there's other things that can be done. So it's continuing with the marketing activities and continuing promoting the fantastic things that there are around Chelmsford. Interestingly, though, just a little note was that a one-off post right at the very beginning of the pandemic was one of our best performing posts. It was about road names, which I don't know, whatever floats your boat, I guess, in Chelmsford. But we reached 2,434 people with a 10% engagement rate. Now that may not seem particularly high to you, but it was one of our best performing posts at the time. So yeah, interesting what people will click on. There's loads of marketing database statistics. I'm thinking in particular of Councillor Highlands. When I display this slide, I'm not going to go through every detail on here. The thing that you need to know is the one that I've paused on now, which is the unique open rate is 43.5%, which is above government delivery benchmarking figures. That means how many people opened the emails that we've been sending out. It's above the government benchmarks. And again, with the monthly engagement rate at 84%, again, above government benchmarks. Legal and democratic services, I've just got a few more slides. Again, working incredibly hard throughout the coronavirus crisis. But they've worked like other services, adapted really well and quickly to remote working, and that means that they've managed to be completely operational in full, despite increased workloads in some areas. Democratic services, a big shout out now in particular to Dan Bird and to Brian Mayfield for all the hard work that they've put in for allowing council meetings to go online. They've been superstars. And also a big shout out to Michael Sage as well, who's been helping get the technology right from a digital services point of view. So thank you to everybody in Democratic Services who got our council meetings running, and we're now fully on schedule as per the original meetings. I'm reliably informed. The election team, I mentioned this briefly earlier on, but dealt with 4 elections in 2019, only one of which was planned. That's wow, that's just a lot of work, and I think they performed brilliantly. And of course there's more stuff to come, so as usual. And yeah, the legal team was obviously continuing their work. I'd like to tell you more about what the legal team are doing, but a lot of it's confidential. So but I'm sure you understand that they're working hard like everybody else. Various things have been rolled out. We know what's been going on in the working groups supported by the legal and democratic team, the Chelmsford Policy Board working group on connectivity and local democracy, meeting with parishes, looking at parishing the unparished areas, and lots of work going on there. And in particular, for Councillor Dayden's note that a petition scheme has been amended. Our petition scheme has been amended to enable easier submission of e-petitions, and the council is also considering introducing its own e-petition scheme. Museums and theatres, we know that we reopened the museums. The important thing about that is that 80,000 visitors have come to see us at the museums since it was opened, which is about 120% increase on last year. Fantastic for the team at the museum, so well done to them. And I, seeing as Oaklands Park is my local park, I have been to the Hive Cafe quite a few times, and it's a brilliant addition to it as well. And great to see more schools getting involved, obviously before the pandemic, but we hope that will come back at some point soon as well. So lots of work from the Arts and Culture team as well, I should say. Sorry, they were successful in a bid to raise £37,500, which has been to establish new local cultural education partnership, which is fantastic news, and working really hard on lots of stuff there. And we ran a successful pilot for the first Melfest, which is a 5-day festival aimed at supporting people during the holidays. Just this slide and one more after it. So finally, for museums, theatres and culture services, so we've been starting to look at what is the future for Chelmsford City Theatres. We've got lots of ambitious plans, some of them put on hold at the moment. We don't know what the future of the theatres is going to be like over the next few months and probably the next few years, but we will be doing our best to take them forward in a world that's pretty uncertain at the moment, but we will be certainly looking at that. And Essex 2020 Year of Science and Creativity. We've seen 3 major firsts for our theatre. I mentioned earlier the Someone Who'll Watch Over Me play. We had our first outdoor play. Who remembers that last summer? The Arthur J play, which was featured on BBC Essex. And it was our first year offering creative industry talks, which is good to see new stuff. And obviously COVID-19 has kind of put a bit of a dampener on all of those things, but we hope to get back to it. There you go. You'll be pleased to know that I've now finished. Does anybody have any questions?
I'll first of all say that I'd like to thank you very much for an extremely comprehensive run through of all the aspects of your portfolio. I would encourage all the members here tonight, when they get these slides, when they get a spare moment, to actually catch up on all the different items, so they get a better comprehensive view of what's actually gone on. But thank you again for that. That was very comprehensive. I've not got any questions from everybody. Yes, I have. Not unexpectedly, I've now got Councillor Hyland.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Councillor Goldman, for an excellent presentation. I'd just like to also make sure you're recognised for the part that you played in the Charter of Modern Day Slavery being signed by the Chelmsford City Council, and all councillors for their work towards that. Thank you very much for that. Just as you came to the end of your presentation there, you mentioned some outdoor features. And the question I was asked to ask is, could we create a stage in some of the parks so we can employ some of the theatre staff to outdoor productions? Admiral Park has a natural hill. Gallywood also has a natural hill, Gallywood Common. And I'm sure there are many areas when we are able to use those spaces could enable some of the theatre self-employed people to get back to live productions. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a really good question, and it's certainly something I know that we have been looking at, is taking more stuff outside. One of the difficulties is not knowing the time has been not knowing the time frame about when we can all get back outside, even in a socially distanced kind of way. With gatherings supposed to be of kind of 6 people or less or fewer, I should say. That's hard. And then, it's not just about putting on the performance, it's also about socially distanced rehearsals and, selling tickets in advance, and all of that kind of stuff plays into it. I would absolutely love, though, to see more performances outside. And as much as I love the theatre, and and certainly in December, I would rather be inside a theatre than I would be standing outside somewhere. As much as I love the theatre, we shouldn't be confined to the theatre as a building. Theatre is more than just a building. Theatre is, performing arts. And I think the R4J production last year just showed how successful and how really inspiring it can be to see things outside, and to see that done from our theatres team was absolutely brilliant. So yeah, I'd love to see more stuff go outside, and I know that it is something that the theatres team are looking at. How far we get with it, I honestly can't say at the moment, but it is definitely something that we're looking at. So thank you for raising it.
Thank you for that. Any other questions, Councillor Whitehead?
Yes, Chairman. The recent events meant that in Backnang, our twin town, they had a similar problem. And you mentioned outdoor events. They had an outdoor cinema, which was incredibly popular. And last weekend, they had an outdoor church service, of which a couple of hundred people attended. My son plays in the part of the orchestra there, so I get feedback from it, really. Could we not try holding an outdoor event ourselves? We've got large screens and so on. To utilise, and the social media part is fine because you're still in your cars and therefore safe, and it was very successful. It's all in the sort of local papers out there, so maybe you could consider that one. Thank you, Councillor Whitehead.
Again, something we have already been considering actually is things like outdoor cinema. I understand that I might ask, is Mr. Nicholson here? Because I believe that he understood it to be that at the moment, outdoor cinemas are expressly forbidden by the government at the moment, or certainly not allowed. I believe it came up at the weekend that somebody asked a question about that, and it was said that they're not allowed to go ahead at the moment. When those kind of things are given the go ahead, then it's certainly something we'd like to look at. I know there are various companies, for example, that provide outdoor cinema kind of services, as it were, and of course we do have a lot of facilities ourselves to be able to put on those sorts of productions. So definitely something we want to explore. Obviously, if we're not allowed to do it, we're not allowed to do it. But yeah, it's a good suggestion, and it's nice to see what other countries are doing as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. I don't appear to have any more questions. So can I just thank Councillor excuse me, Goldman again for her presentation, and encourage people to read it through again when we actually get it. Okay, carrying on the Cabinet portfolio updates. Finally, but last but not least, the Cabinet Member for Sustainable Development, Councillor Mike McCrory. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good evening, members. Well, I should like to start actually by paying tribute to the staff of the Sustainable Communities Directorate. They've worked incredibly hard this last year, and it's been a real privilege to work with people who are so committed and are so enthusiastic and energetic about their work, and particularly in the last 2.5 months or so, when they've really pulled out all the stops to carry on business as usual, with virtual meetings and so on, and having their individual group meetings, their team meetings and so on within the directorate, and trying to keep the momentum going on a lot of these big projects which they're involved with. So what I've done, Chair, if you've seen, I did send it to the officer last Friday in advance. And what I've done is just broken it up into the 5 areas of responsibility which I have within the portfolio. And if I can go into a lot of detail, but I'll perhaps just pick out on the main bullet points that I've highlighted there. So obviously, one of the main ones is the town planning function, which forms a very large part of the directorate. And the year's really been dominated very much with the local plan in its final stages. So last year we had those main modifications come back from the inspector. They were consulted on, they went through council, and we waited for the final letter from the inspector. We were hoping for it before Christmas. It didn't come. We hoped for it in January. Eventually it came on February the 25th, I believe it was. And so we could then go ahead with the adoption meeting, which, as we all know, was frustrated by events. But we had the meeting last week and we finally had the plan adopted. We do have the 6 weeks period where there is allowed for in case there's any judicial review, but that's really only if there's some technicality on the legal process, and we don't believe that that's likely to arise. So alongside those the local plan, we had the supplementary planning documents, which went through various stages and finally went to Cabinet last week as well, I believe it was. And that was a huge amount of work by the officers once again, but with input from members and the policy board. So North East Chelmsford Garden Village, it's called Garden Village because that qualified for certain status within the government, but we are hoping that because of the size of it, we can actually move into what's known as a garden town, although in government terms, but we prefer to call it a garden settlement. But that will allow more government funding to come through to process all the various work that needs to be done. And we're all familiar with the big elements up there in terms of the station, the bypass and so on. Other implications there on the A12 widening, which doesn't actually affect us so much as it does Braintree and Colchester and so on, but obviously the Boreham interchange is the very beginning of that widening, so we've been involved in that, and we keep reminding Highways England not to forget that that interchange is absolutely crucial to us. Master plans, that report went to Cabinet last October, I believe it was, on the process, and since then we've carried forward with Warren Farm, north of Southwood and Ferrers. There are others at various stages being worked through. There will be a workshop next Tuesday, I believe it is, for members to attend, so they will understand what the opportunities are and indeed the limitations are of master plans. But this is a very crucial part in developing our strategic growth sites, and we want members to be and feel that they are meaningfully involved in all of that. There's been some contentious planning applications, discussions, enforcements and various consultations and so on. Hanbury Road, a very controversial one that's coming up tomorrow night at planning, so that will be quite interesting. We've tried to facilitate the getting the Shire Hall back into use. There's been some difficulties with the potential developer in what their ideas are for the internal arrangements there, and our planners have been involved with trying to come up with a scheme which would suit developers but would also suit the our historic buildings officer and indeed Historic England, who have a particular interest because of the Shire Hall's listed status. So we're trying to push that along as hard we can, but I think the last few weeks and months have put a bit of a hold on that one as far as the developer is concerned. Bradwell B, I mean, that's going to be a really big issue for us. We agreed the first stage consultation last week at the policy board, and I'm pleased to say we had a unanimous support across the across the parties for a pretty robust response to Bradwell B, and we've subsequently met with the Bradwell B promoters, and we've put forward those comments, shall we say, rather more forcibly than is in the written word of the consultation. I think we've left them in no doubt at all that we have very significant concerns of the highways implications for particularly Southwold and Ferrers and the highway network of the whole of Chelmsford and the various interchanges which will be affected by a huge number of HGV lorries moving around. And we tried to push them on more rail transport and more marine transport. The rail transport doesn't necessarily mean the branch line there. What the suggestion is that it could come from Harwich and then across the water by barges. So this is all what they've taken on board, and we'll have further discussions with them in the not too distant future. Waterside, this is a brownfield site that everybody's familiar with, the former gasworks site in the centre of Chelmsford. We've got housing infrastructure funding there to facilitate that development. We are obliged to develop brownfield land before greenfield land, and so this is one of those sites we're taking forward. Design brief is being worked on at the moment, planning application later this year. The decontamination study, we're expecting that quite soon because apparently they were able to carry on their work during this pandemic, so that's quite helpful. And we're hoping that this new bridge from the Great Baddow car park across the river onto the site to facilitate the access and so on, that should be constructed in 2022, all being well. Tyndall Square, you'll be familiar with the fact that went last week, wasn't it? The meeting last week when we agreed to go further to the detailed design and tender stage on that one. So that's something that fits in with what's going on at the moment in terms of the pop-up schemes that the County Council's Highways Authority are promoting and started today, for facilitating wider pedestrian routes and cycle routes in the city centre. And they've made a start on that with some initial funding from the government, and the anticipation is that we will get more government funding later on to extend these schemes. So that more or less covers what's been going on in town planning. There's an awful lot more I could go into, but I'll keep it at that at the moment, Chair. Car parks. This obviously is crucial to the council's income streams. Needless to say, we've taken a hit in the last couple of months or so, but during the last year, we introduced more charging points. There's now 16 in the city centre car parks. There are others in supermarkets and petrol stations, and also at the park and rides. Introduced cashless payments, which has gone very smoothly. We had to increase our charges for the first time in 2 years, a fairly modest increase, if I may say so. Not had any adverse feedback on that. We've been in discussion with the County Council on the future operation of the park and ride sites. Again, that's been held up a little bit this last few weeks because of they've not been in operation, but the discussions are going on as to the future arrangements for managing those sites. As a council, we would like to take that on because it obviously would fit in with our overall car parking strategy, which is being worked on at the moment by officers in developing an evidence base for us, so that we fully understand what future demands are going to be and what the options are going to be. Because we have to bear in mind there are quite a few private car parks in the centre of Chelmsford as well. So that all needs to be taken into account. And so the short stay and the long stay are different opportunities for us. But there are opportunities as well if we were to consider closing some of the smaller short stay car parks for development, or for other uses. So all that will be looked at in the car park strategy. The South Essex Parking Partnership is another area which is quite an onerous area of work. Obviously, people probably are familiar with the fact that Essex is divided into two, with the North Essex Parking Partnership and the South Essex Parking Partnership, and we are one of the 6 in the south, and we are the lead council in that. So a lot of the work comes through us. I'm on a panel which considers all the these various schemes, and in particular the objections, and that can be quite interesting at times. And then obviously within Chelmsford itself, then I have oversight of all the schemes that come forward and being promoted. And what we get is technical reports from the officers who've been out and visited, surveyed the particular roads, the area, at different times of the day, different days of the week, sometimes in the school holidays, sometimes outside the school holidays, all to get a feel for whether there is a genuine need for parking restriction schemes. Obviously, there is a restricted budget, so they have to meet the criteria. So that's quite a politically sensitive area of work at times. Building control, that's a fairly small team within the directorate. They generally are working very well. During this last half a dozen weeks or so, they've noticed something like a 50% drop in the applications, but in the last week or so, they've started to pick up again as the construction industry starts to restart again its activities. But we are very competitive, even though we did have to increase our charges this time round. But they've all been working from home, and they've seemed to be able to manage with restricted site visits and so on, in the same way as the development management also had to work in the same way. So there's various working groups associated with planning and various committees and so on, and I've listed them there. Councillor Hyland made the point about what the outcomes are, and with so many of these things, particularly if you have other councils involved and you're getting a consensus view, things can be frustratingly slow, but it's important to always try and get a united front on a lot of these issues. So we have the various cabinet members in Essex, we meet up, we have a liaison with Braintree, which is obviously important, cross-border there. Transport East is a consortium of councils and transport authorities across the east of England, and we're trying to coordinate our bids to government there, because we find other parts of the country have, like particularly the metropolitan areas, have greater clout with the government, and we've formed ourselves to try and to match that demands on government, because we feel we're being left out a bit in the east of England. So there's various other things, the coastal protection and so on, and the protection of the wildlife and so on, which schemes which Chelmsford is actually leading on for Essex, and all the other authorities contribute to the running costs of that. My colleague, Councillor Bracken, who's the Deputy Cabinet Member, he covers the business and economic development. There is a degree of crossover with the Deputy Leader, as has been touched on earlier in her presentation, but essentially he's there to maintain and develop various relationships with companies and business in Chelmsford, and to try and promote activity and to help them in with advice and guidance and point them in the right direction when they want to expand their businesses or they're looking for locations and so on. So that's a big part of his work. And again, he represents the council on various boards and forums, and tech ambassadors has been mentioned, can't spell, tech ambassadors. That's something that Councillor Goldman mentioned as well. The bid, which is obviously the businesses within Chelmsford City area, they've got a grouping which Councillor Bracken attends quite regularly. They meet even during the pandemic period, and we're doing very best to try and help them with how they can claim grants and so on, which the government has made available to people, and to process them. And that's been quite a success story in recent weeks. I think we're up there amongst the top performers in the country for processing these grants out to businesses. So that's about it, Chair. I hope I haven't gone on too long, but happy to take any questions, of course. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McCrory. Any questions? It appears not. Obviously a comprehensive report, Mike.
Well, if I may say so, Chair, we did, and has been mentioned earlier in the leader's report, we do make ourselves available to other members when issues come up with cabinet papers or whatever. But I would encourage any member, and indeed most don't, but I would just repeat the offer that we are there if anyone needs to query anything with us at any time. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'd just like to say that to keep up with the consistency, Councillor Hyland wants to ask a question. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions, please, Councillor McCrory. You mentioned travellers, Gypsy and Travellers site. Do you know when we'll be having a Travellers transition site in the county of Essex, and where it might be? And the other question I had was about South Essex Parking Partnership. You mentioned about the timeliness of activity that goes on within that body. Have you any visibility of the turnaround times? My understanding, the feedback I'm getting, it's taking sometimes between 2 and 3 years to process requests to delivery. Given that they have a great deal of work, as you mentioned, to go through, there can be quite a number of hurdles. But do you think it is timely service that they're providing us?
If I may, Chairman. Yes, okay, thank you. On the first point, the transition site in Essex, I'm not aware of that, but I will find out and get back to you and the other members of the committee. As far as SET goes, this is an ambition which I mentioned. I didn't actually mention it this evening, but I put it in my notes. It is an ambition of mine because, like many members, I have experienced great frustration at how long these schemes take to progress. The problem is we have a restricted budget, we have a limited number of staff, we have a huge number of requests. However, we did have quite a significant significant sum of money that we didn't use last year, and it was my ambition to make use of that. However, our income during this last 2.5 months or so has taken a very, very significant hit. And so we're going to have to draw down on those reserves just to keep things going. But the one thing which I do find often happens, and I've had one of these schemes myself, where, shall we say, 95% of the residents in a road are in favour of a scheme, and a couple of individuals, and they do not necessarily have to live in that road. They can anyone can object to a TRO, traffic regulation order, and if they object, that can slow the whole thing down by months and months and months, because you have to go through the whole process of appeal and all the rest of it. But I would say 3 years is a bit is unacceptable. 2 years when you have an appeal is not unknown, but it is my ambition to speed that process up, certainly. So I share that frustration, and alongside many others, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCrory. I do not have any other questions in front of me. So I'd like to thank you again for your comprehensive report. And we move on swiftly to item number 7. And thank you for the Cabinet members for their input earlier and for the questions asked on each item. Okay, item number 7 is the quarterly review of the work of the Chelmsford Policy Board. Actually, this is a very comprehensive report, which is not just a quarterly review. It actually takes us back to the first meeting at inception in June last year. And it's very comprehensive, which effectively was finalised at the Policy Board meeting last Thursday. So we have had quite a lot of coverage recently. I understand Councillor Graham is actually taking this item. So it's over to you, young man. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as you rightly say, it does cover the whole year, and I welcome the fact that that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee at the start decided that it wanted to see how the Policy Board unfolded, because it was set up for the first time in June of last year. And although it took over a number of the functions of the previous Development Policy Committee, and indeed, as Councillor McCrory was saying, it continues to have that role in terms of supplementary planning documents and master plans, which I may come back to. It was new from something that came with the new administration, that we wanted to work across party and in particular with community groups as well, in order to develop policy and strategies which were particularly key to the way forward for the council, and to enable some real thinking out of the box, and because we do have a really talented pool of officers and members, and it's all too easy, we felt, to get bogged down and tied up with day-to-day executive functions, and obviously in the virus days, it's been very much a firefighting days. But even in normality, we felt we needed to take time out, members and officers, to develop a longer-term view across party that can, in some cases, look further than the electoral cycle as well. I think at the start there was a certain amount of trepidation amongst officers that maybe we were somehow duplicating the work that was already going on, that somehow we were distracting them in the time that they had available away from the day-to-day executive functions and carrying out of the council's own services that was necessary. But I want to acknowledge the fact that officers have responded really well, in my experience, to that challenge, and we've all gradually come to understand how the work of the working groups and the policy board interacts with cabinet members and with the officers at various levels in the various directorates in a way which I think people are now very comfortable does not duplicate, but merely reinforces and gives a longer term perspective to some of the work which is going on. So, as you say, Chair, we went through the report at some length in the policy board, and so I won't do that again today. I just want to touch on a couple of things and would welcome some questions. I mentioned the fact that part of the goals here, part of the motivation, was to develop policies which are for Chelmsford rather than for Chelmsford City Council. Now, obviously, we have a lot of strategic thinking and planning to do in terms of the future of the services that we ourselves have either statutory or a voluntary responsibility to deliver. But the enormous range of things which happen in Chelmsford, which aren't our direct control, nevertheless affect the lives of Chelmsford residents hugely, whether it's other levels of government that are involved, or charities, or voluntary groups of one sort or another. The quality of life for Chelmsford is much, much wider than the services which we ourselves deliver. And so the goal has been in several areas to really bring together those outside organisations to get them focused on some of the policy areas that we've been developing. A very good example right at the start, or towards the start, was the workshop that we had with those who supported rough sleepers, and that's work that still needs to progress and is high on the agenda to carry forward. Because what we found is that there were loads of people who were working on a very, very difficult problem. But there wasn't a lot of coordination. There wasn't even a lot of knowledge about what the various commissioned and non-commissioned bodies actually did in terms of the support that they were giving. And so bringing those people together and beginning to think about how one bring them together under a banner of sorts is really going to be a worthwhile thing. And more recently, the same thing happened with the Waterways Working Group, where a very, very successful workshop, in my opinion, covered various aspects of the waterways ideas that have been developed, and again I think has brought together the real enthusiasm of the city as a whole as to how we deal with the future of those waterways. And some of those projects are going to be really long term, and as I say, will outlive me certainly, but also the life of this administration and the next, I'm sure. So I wanted to mention that. I think that the next thing for me to just highlight is that with the virus that's hit us recently, then one of the early tasks of all of the working groups is going to have to be to look at the strategic approach or the work streams that they developed in advance of that. Some things have been slowed down, obviously, and in some cases that hasn't mattered too much. The strategy is still there to be developed, and the action plans from the strategies to be developed and put into practice. In other areas, the virus situation has accelerated the need for some of these things. It's accelerated the possible outcomes of the rough sleeping strategy, for example, as we try to wrestle with what's going to happen once the stay of the rough sleepers inside the hotel comes to an end. There's a lot of work going on, as Councillor Simon Goldman knows, in the housing working groups to try to identify exactly the property needs and the support needs moving forward, and that's become highlighted, and the need for action, always very high on this administration's agenda, has been underlined by the opportunity that COVID-19 might present us with. And similarly with the health and wellbeing strategy, which we inherited a draft of, but which was developed and improved as a living document over the early meetings of the Health and Wellbeing Working Group. I think that, again, the change of behaviour patterns that COVID-19 has brought with it, working from home has been mentioned, exercising for an hour a day, walking more, cycling more, and the fitness side of things, which has been underlined for people in the area of lockdown. Again, there's a big challenge to see how we can take advantage of those changes in attitudes and build into recovery from the virus some of the habits which have been a good thing. Next thing I wanted to mention and underline was the newest working group, which is the movement around the city working group. There was some resistance in looking at that, although clearly it was part of our determination as administration to really grapple with the need for infrastructure in advance or parallel with development, and to reduce congestion around the city and to look at pollution levels and so on and so forth. And the worry was that, of course, we don't have very much direct control. We have some control through the planning system, but the Highways Department is something different again, and the amount of money that comes into major schemes is very much government driven. What's been really pleasing, though, is that we've found that the County Council officers, the Highways Department officers that have affiliated themselves with this working group, have got amazingly radical and good ideas, which they are delighted to suddenly find that Chelmsford wants to embrace them and embrace the ideas that they've been working on for some time, which have inevitably been put to one side all too often because the short-termism that tends to be characterising reactions in these areas, the short-termism doesn't allow for the longer-term strategy. So we're really grateful for that to be happening. And finally, I just wanted to touch on master plans, which Councillor McCrory was talking about, because one of the things within the planning side of the policy board, which is going to be key, is to look at the way in which the major strategic sites in the local plan that's just been approved are actually developed. And just to correct one, Councillor McCrory, unless I'm wrong, I think the workshop that he's talking about is next Monday in the evening, not next Tuesday. And I do commend you all to come and join that virtually and see how the master planning process is meant to be unfolding. We're very, very committed, Chair, to involving the public and, well, members and the public and local organisations and local people at the right stage in the planning process, so that there's a feeling of genuine input and genuine improvement that comes from their involvement at the right stage of planning the development of sites. And the policy board has its role to play in driving those consultations, in looking at the consultation responses and improving the master plan as it unfolds towards the planning application stage. So it may come across in my voice, I'm very enthusiastic about all of this. I think that we've made a good start. It's been an odd year, characterised by all sorts of elections and viruses and no sooner had we arrived, summer arrived, and so on and so forth. But I think that we can look back on the year with some satisfaction. We've learned an awful lot about what works best in the working group context, and I think we can build on that and turn this into a highly satisfactory way in which we contribute to the work of the cabinet and officers in their execution of things in a strategic and planning sense. So if I leave it there, Chair, and just welcome questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Purley. Very precise, just what I wanted. That was excellent. Yeah, it covered a hell of a lot. Councillor Hyland, I think, sorry, something's come up on my screen in front of it. Have you actually asked a question, Richard?
No, Chair, not on this occasion, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Goldman, Simon, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say, as a member on a couple of these working groups, that it's been really very good, actually. It's new to this role as well. I think it introduced me to a lot of new things that I didn't know about. But I'd also like to say about Councillor Pooley. He's been extremely passionate about this for the last year and extremely driven. And he's pushed the working groups quite a bit further than I think we would have got anyway. And as he says, it's been a really difficult year with one thing and another. But we are getting there. And I think this next year could be really interesting what comes out of these various groups. But I just want to know, Councillor Pooley, do you think the groups have been working well, and where would you like to see us improve, or what could be changed? And I suppose to the officers, do they think they're getting value from these various groups? And where, are we taking too much of their time, or do they feel that actually having the members on board as we are with these groups and cross-party as well, that it is being beneficial?
Thank you, Simon. And to take the second question first, hopefully the officers involved are being straightforward with me and with members of the working group in responding that they like the process, that they're all very busy. I thoroughly understand that. But maybe Mr. Nicholson would like to come in and give the officer perspective as to whether he thinks it's working from that point of view.
Councillor Nicholson? Not Councillor, sorry. Keith Nicholson. Do you want to add to that?
No, well, let me come back and I'll try and deal with the first point, which was, do I think that some aspects of it all could be improved? And predictably, I think I wouldn't be honest, and I wouldn't be doing my job if I was saying everything has been perfect. I think that these working groups have been at their best when the cabinet members have involved themselves quite enthusiastically in the working group process. Because in the last analysis, we're not some independent, different strand of the council's working patterns. We are there to support the cabinet member and to assist him or her in their strategic thinking, and to take things away into new ways of thinking, outward-looking ways of thinking, out-of-the-box thinking, which the cabinet member may not have time to look at, and his officers may not necessarily have time to look at from day to day. So the working groups have been at their best when the cabinet members have involved themselves, and I know that that's increasingly been the case as the year has gone by. That's also true of the times when councillors who are not necessarily members of the working group nevertheless come to attend working group sessions on matters where they have a particular interest. One of the things you say, I'm passionate about this, I do certainly strongly believe that that we have this talented bunch of people here, and a genuine need to involve people who have interest in different areas of the council's activity in ways of carrying out our thinking. And I think the policy board allows precisely that opportunity for members of all parties who don't necessarily have roles defined by committee chairmanships or cabinet members or whatever. So again, the working groups have been at their best when additional members from time to time come and join in. I think we can use workshops more. I think that's been a lesson that we've learned, and I know that Councillor Lager, in the context of the movement around the city working group, is planning exactly that. I think that going back to the health and well-being strategy, to an extent that already exists through Live Well Essex and Live Well Chelmsford, but I'm sure that as we look at the ways in which the key health and well-being objectives are carried forward in the post-COVID world, that we will want to involve ourselves much more, not necessarily formally, but in a slightly more structured way with the organisations around the city who have a particular interest in various aspects of health and well-being. I think on a minor administrative point, I think we need to look at the frequency of our meetings, because sometimes they get very cluttered and involve a lot of different officers from different sides of the council spending an awful long evening when they are only there for maybe one or two items there. And also it does need to coincide where we have recommendations to make to Cabinet. We need to make sure that there's time for the policy board decisions and recommendations to make their way into a Cabinet without too long a delay, because otherwise there's an unnecessary time lag before Cabinet consider some of those things. So I could go on, Councillor Goldman, and I welcome your help and support in all of that, because I need that. So suggestions as to how it can be improved will be very welcome.
Okay, thank you ever so much for that, Councillor Pooley, and for the questions. Are there any other questions on this item? I appear not to have any. Okay, thank you again, Graham.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, moving on to the item number 8, reports from representatives on outside bodies. I understand you're doing this for us, Daniel.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is a report we get every few years. I've emailed around some of the councillors that are on being appointed by council to outside bodies, and we just get a short report back from them. You'll see all of those are in the appendices to the report, and if there's any comments or questions, we'll be happy to either answer them now or take them back to the individual councillors and provide responses later. And the report's just for noting. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. I assume no comments. No. Okay, moving swiftly on. Item number 9, the annual report on the scrutiny function for 19 to 20.
Apologies, I did have my hand up for this one.
Are you using the typing? Yes, you have. Yeah, you came in rather late after I'd sort of finished, but I will allow you to speak, sir.
Thank you, Chair. The question really is how much does the Essex Travellers Unit cost Chelmsford City Council, and are we getting value for money from them?
I think we're back online, just quickly testing the audio with digital. Oh, sorry about that, everyone. The YouTube stream is back live, so we're now with everyone again. I believe we were just finishing the kind of what item we were on. I don't know if we just missed the end of that item, but it was just one for noting. And Councillor Galley, I think we just started the item on the Chief Exec's urgent decisions, if you'd like to pick up from there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Daniel. We obviously make note of all the decisions taken under delegation to the Chief Executive, and the meetings, the actual decisions that were taken since the last meeting amount to 3, and I'm asking the members actually to just note them, please. Item number 11 is the work programme. The next meeting will be in September. Are you taking this one, Dan, or do you want me to?
I'll just say a little bit about it, Chair. It's just a standard work programme item we get to every meeting. It covers the next year or so's worth of meetings. There were some items we were due to have at this meeting, but due to everything that's been going on, some of them have been pushed back. And that includes some items on Riverside and a few other bits like that. They've been put in for sort of around September meetings, and that will be sort of kept under review by officers. And if we need to amend the programme further, we'll let members know. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you for that, Dan. Bearing in mind that we've had a hell of a lot crammed into this meeting tonight, all very good comprehensive reports, very good questions asked of each of the members. We haven't got any urgent business as I understand it, so I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everybody for their involvement, whatever big or small that may be. It all helps to make the meeting gel and to make it a worthwhile meeting.
We have got a question from Councillor Lager quickly before we finish.
Yes, I've just noticed just this minute come up. Sorry, Councillor Lager.
Thank you, Councillor Galley. It was a question about the unscheduled future work programme. I don't know if Mr. Nicholson would be able to answer it. I understand the current situation has meant that the council officers have been firefighting on many fronts. Many work streams have been put on hold and understandably have fallen by the wayside. However, the Community Safety Communication Task and Finish Group has been in limbo now for about 6 months since the interim report was published. And I was wondering if we could at least set a target date for delivery of the final report and start working once more towards delivery of it again. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm not sure that Keith Nicholson is actually here.
Yeah, Councillor Galley, Chairman, I'm here.
You are, yeah.
I'll pick that up with the officer who's leading on that. I'll come back to you on it.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholson.
Okay, you happy with that, Councillor Lager?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay, many thanks. Right, as I say, there's no urgent business tonight that I'm aware of. Just really reiterate what I was trying to say is that I welcomed everybody's opportunity to take part both on the providing and the asking questions. I think it was a very worthwhile meeting, a hell of a lot crammed in. We still got within the 2050 that I'd aimed as the target to finish. Rather jokingly, I thought at the time. We managed to achieve it, and a lot's been learned from it. So thank you to everybody, and I look forward to seeing those in September for the next meeting and elsewhere with other committee meetings that we're all involved in. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Good night.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chairman.